This video I wanted to spend discussing the big picture, the big significance that we should take from reading this story. I guess we could say this is the moral of the story. And this is a story that I'd read, of course, before. I've always really liked it, but I have not read this story in a while. It had been actually a few years since I've read it before this class. And reading it this time, I was able to really pick up on some insight that I missed before, as far as kind of what the moral lesson is here, that Gawain and also that the reader should take away from the story. But there's also some questions that I'm left with, and I'm curious if any of you have an answer for it. So as far as why this all happens to poor Gawain, and that's another thing you have to look at, this seems really mean. I mean, what the Green Knight does, he goes up and basically breaks up the Camelot's party. We find out at the end that basically Morgan has wanted to see if the kingdom of Camelot is as pure and as noble as its reputation seems to suggest. So she sends the Green Knight off to bust up this party briefly and have the challenge of the beheading game. Well, think about that. Gawain, for a year, he knows that his days are numbered that whole year. And think about when it describes the year, how fast that year goes by. I mean, after the party, it's just like a paragraph or so that talks about, oh, well, here comes the rest of the holidays, and then they're gone, and then all of a sudden, here it is, Gawain has to leave to go find the Green Knight. And he knows that when he finds the Green Knight, that's going to be his death, based on the terms of the challenge. And there's a line in here. Let me see if I can find it quickly. It's when Sir Gawain is departing, and the people are very sad to see him go, but he of course he has to go anyway. And we may ask ourselves, well, why? I mean, the Green Knight's gone. He's not going to come back and find you. He's gone. The only terms are you're supposed to go find him. The reason why that Gawain even has to go is kind of explained, because the crowd, it talks about the sorrow of the crowd. They're thinking about how much potential that Gawain has as a leader, and the crowd thinks of it. Before he departs, the crowd just thinks about how terrible it is that this great potential leader must die for the sake of nothing else than pride. That's the line I'm looking for. It has a line where it says the word pride. And this is going to be a huge theme of the whole entire moral. The moral is Gawain is someone who learns that as good as he is, he still has the sin of pride, and he still has the sin of deceit. He's deceptive to his host, which is a big no-no for the vows of a knight. But he learns some things of himself, that he is a man who is not perfect. He does have human weaknesses. And I still think that it's kind of a mean-spirited lesson to teach him, to make him wait for a year in fear of his impending doom, and then, you know, when he finally does meet the Green Knight at the Green Chapel, the cave-like structure, on the day of New Year's that they're supposed to have their confrontation, he takes those two practice swings, and the first one Gawain flinches from, and the Green Knight demeans him on that and says he's not brave and he's not the real Gawain that he's heard about because he flinched. And anyway, it seemed kind of mean-spirited for the ultimate lesson being a Christian lesson that's being taught here. I would argue that the ultimate lesson here is, if you look at when this takes place, Christmas time, well, the celebration of Christmas is for one who was without sin. And here we have someone whose reputation is so near that sinless state. The reputation of Gawain is so noble that he learns that he still has sin in his nature. If we look at the symbolism of his shield and what's on his shield, we talked about in the last video that pentagram. I think you should pay attention to what each of those points signify. The text does explain what each point of the pentagram shows about Gawain's character. On the inside of his shield, though, is the image of Mary. This would be the mother of Christ, Mary. And I think it's interesting that as soon as Gawain reaches the Green Knight's manor, before the Green Chapel, when he doesn't really know it's the Green Knight's manor, the first thing that they do is strip him of his armor, and he lets him take off his armor, including his shield. He already has a shield, symbolically as a very Christian shield with the symbol of Mary on the inside. Later on in the story, Gawain adopts another type of shield to protect him, and that shield would be that green girdle. Now that green girdle would be very pagan. There's no religious significance tied to it. It's pagan. It's just, I mean, the lady says, hey, by the way, this girdle will make you invulnerable to anyone who wears it. She doesn't explain why, she doesn't explain by what power, but Gawain, on some level, not fully, but on some level, Gawain believes that this girdle will keep him safe. He has cast aside the shield that has on the front the crest that he's known for as far as the virtue of his own character that each of those 5 points of the star symbolize. And on the inside, he's also forsaken Mary's protection. He's cast that shield aside. When he goes off to meet the Green Knight finally, the shield he gets back on, but he puts it on his back. Well, what good is it going to do him on his back? No good at all. This is a shield should be worn in front to protect. Not that Gawain could protect himself anyway for the terms of the challenge, but anyway, I think we should look at the shield as far as the one he originally had that has the religious overtone, and the one he's depending on to shield him is that green girdle. That's where he has put his faith, and his faith is in pay attention to the color green, but there's lots of symbolic interpretations of that color. One would be green as a symbol of paganism, nature. Nature would be the opposite of Christianity. Nature's where you go to find pagan gods. But here he's put his trust in magic, and it's non-Christian magic. And we find out it's man-made magic. And also we never know if this girdle is actually one of invulnerability. He does get cut, but one thing I couldn't really figure out is if the reason why the Green Knight was able to pick up his head and go off at the beginning was because he was wearing the girdle that Morgan had enchanted, or if it was all just an illusion, because, you know, the Green Knight, he gets beheaded by his own axe, so that could be just a piece of trickery from Morgan. He still has his head cut, but he lives through it, so it's not like nothing would wound him. It's just that nothing would kill him. And so at the end, when Gawain is wounded, I don't know if the girdle would have protected him or not. I don't know if it's just, I don't know if the girdle really works or not. I don't know how Morgan's magic works. But I think that it's important that on a pretty large level, Gawain trusts in the magic, because as soon as he gets it, he goes back happy, because he thinks, oh good, I'm going to live. I think it's interesting that when the time actually gets there, he still winces from that axe, so that shows that he doesn't trust this girdle completely. He still does wince when the axe feigns down. He still draws back, and if he'd had complete confidence in the girdle, he probably wouldn't have done that. But still, he has quite a bit of devotion to the girdle, and not to, I'd argue, the symbolic Christian shield that he should have. Think about it. With the merits of Christianity, you would see this life anyway as temporary, ultimately going on to immortality anyway. So he should already have a girdle of invulnerability, because even if the Green Knight beheads him, he's still alive. It's that immortality of the next step that he would see himself as going to. That's not good enough for Gawain, though. He doesn't want to go on to the next place. He wants to stay and live life, and I think it's because he likes the ladies, he likes the parties, he enjoys being a knight, he enjoys being young, he enjoys having a good reputation. He likes life, and I think he realizes with the threat of death just how much he enjoys life.